Hey guys, it's David from Gatecrasher, and I'm here to talk a little bit about a recent acquisition of mine, Fantasy Warriors, a miniatures war game from over 30 years ago. I've talked about it on the podcast a little bit already. It was my first ever miniatures war game, so that's one of the reasons I want to talk about it, but it's also a significant game just in the history of the development of miniatures war games because it was the first ever boxed starter set where you got everything you needed to play, over 100 miniatures, rulebook, quick reference sheet, dice, counters, everything. So we are going to take a look at this box that I've managed to acquire from the wonders of eBay. It's the first time that I will be looking at Fantasy Warriors in terms of its components in quite a while. I actually did play a bit of it back in the 2000s, weirdly enough. I sort of had a renaissance with it then. And so I can give my opinions on the game as well in terms of how it plays, its rules. I actually think it's a pretty underrated game, not only for its legacy, but also just as a game. I think it's actually a really good game. So I'm going to talk about it a little bit here and come along for the journey. If you're familiar with Fantasy Warriors, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. And if you'd like more content like this, be sure to like and subscribe. Okay, let's go take a look at the box. Okay, and here it is, the box in all of its glory. As you can see, this is your, pretty standard design for a starter box of miniatures. But as I mentioned in the intro, this is the first ever such thing. So we've got, description of what's in the rule book and some nice art all around. When I first saw this box, I had just read The Hobbit like that year, so that this was speaking to me on a deep spiritual level. Okay, let me show the back actually. Here's the back. It's it's almost like they don't want to show more than what's in the box. So it's really just the figures, dice, rulebook, all this stuff. And when we get the box open, you'll see all these counters. So obviously this is a used set, so it's not in pristine condition. However, it's got pretty much everything I think that came in the box originally. This a little, I don't know, I hesitate to call it a catalog. I think it's maybe a little bit more, you could say it's just sort of a starter selection, Here are some of the miniatures you can order. The typewritten font is definitely a product of its age, including a couple typos there in the text. Mark Copplestone and Nick Lund were the figure sculptors. Copplestone is still around. Nick Lund, I don't think, has been active in the hobby since Grenadier went out of business, as far as I know. Correct me in the comments if you know otherwise. Then, I don't think this even came in I don't remember this from the original box that I got. This is the Grenadier 1991 catalog, which is pretty cool. This is art of one of the models you could get, and from the Fantasy Warriors line. This is called a Juggernaut. It's for the Orc army, and yeah, pretty good. Nice, bright. Full color. They used to run this this double page spread in Dragon magazine. And I think by the time I saw it, I'd already gotten the box, but I used to drool over all the other pictures, including, of course, the Goblin War Giant. It had a strange propensity in the Fantasy Warriors line for attaching war as the adjective. So there was a war giant, there was a war cannon, War Troll, I think, was another one. Just war everything. I also love their sort of over-the-top ad copy. An impressive group of undead command figures, inspiring and terrifying. Yeah, maybe. I mean, here's the thing. You know, these figures, they do not hold up to modern figure sculpting standards by any means. You know, no one's gonna sit here and say that, you know, these are somehow like lost gems as compared to the intricate designs that we see nowadays. But for myself, I don't know. I find them very charming. I think part of it is the fact that they were hand sculpted. You know, they have character. They have character. The Nick Lund orc line is still my favorite orc line of any fantasy miniatures range. Oh, there's the War Cannon, which I owned back in the day, and I managed to repurchase a couple years ago. So yeah, I mean, these are, you know, these miniatures have a lot of character, I guess is just how I would put it. Again, they're not, you know, I don't think it's fair to put them side by side with contemporary designs, because it's really apples and oranges as far as I'm concerned. You know, you have miniatures that are being sculpted by hand versus, you know, CAD designs. All right, so that's the Grenadier catalog. A lot of these I've sort of reacquired over the past few years. So, you know, the box really is a sort of crown jewel in the collecting that I've sort of slowly been engaging in with Grenadier miniatures since maybe about 2019 or so. I'm really looking forward to doing more collecting and actually playing this game again. All right, quick reference sheet. So the game mechanics are, in their basic form, nothing terribly innovative. They rely pretty heavily on, like, you know, big fat stacks of modifiers, right? You know, shooting, throw 1d for each figure shooting. In the case of Black in the Sky, throw a number of dice equal to the number of figures shooting multiplied by the number of volleys shot. I'll get to that in a second. The game's use of counters is one of the interesting things they did do. Any 6 thrown is automatic hit, any 1 is automatic miss. To the remaining dice, 2, 3, 4, or 5, apply the relevant modifiers. And so you got, you know, poor unpredictable troops firing, long range, Black in the Sky, bad light, disorganized, in bloodlust or shaken, +2 if they're elite, +1 if they're veterans, 4 up is a hit. Then there's a kill throw, so very similar to Warhammer. You know, you got to do the hit roll and the wound roll, right? And then you have to cross-reference the type of weapon you're using against the armor of the target, and that tells you whether you killed them or not. So it kind of combines the wound roll and the saving throw in the same roll. Melee combat is pretty much the same. My memories of playing this game from 10 years ago, I very much remember, you know, trying to like keep a running tally of modifiers. That's probably my biggest complaint about the game is how you're having to, like, you know, you're adding dice to the pool, you're tracking modifiers, you know, all that kind of stuff. And, you know, different weapons versus different armor results. But the other thing I wanted to say about this quick reference sheet is I actually have kind of pleasant memories whenever I look at this, because when I first got this game back in '91, I was messing around with it, myself, and then a friend was hanging out. We were messing around with it. And somewhere in all of that, I mean, we're, kids, basically. I lost this quick reference sheet. I don't know what happened to it, And then we moved that summer, and I wanted to keep, I wanted to find some friends to play with. But it's you can play the game without the quick reference sheet, but as you can see, I mean, just there's so many modifiers in the game. It is very handy to have this. And so, Grenadier put their address on everything they put out, Springfield, Pennsylvania. And so I wrote to them. I wrote them a letter, and I said, hey, I have your game. I love your game. But I lost the quick reference sheet. What, can you help me out? And a couple weeks later, I got quick reference sheet in a manila envelope with a little letter from, I don't know, their head of their customer service or whoever it was, just saying please accept this with our compliments. So here's the rule book. Certainly nothing to write home about. And I think this is really where Grenadier probably lost out to Games Workshop. Because if you go and you look at the books that were coming out not too long after this one even if you look at Warhammer Fantasy Battle 3rd edition, that's a big hardback book with a lot of photos and great art, just really classic art, And then 4th edition, you had color pieces. It looked professional. It looked slick. And, not that this one looks bad, certainly not by the standards of the era, but it is a little funky. I mean, these guys are kind of a little pixelated, It's a neat idea. You're getting, basically you're getting strategic and tactical advice from the dwarf and the orc general, kind of a fun idea. But yeah, I mean, this was, this is pretty much a direct competitor to Warhammer Fantasy Battle. You had your army lists with your points values. You built your armies against a points budget, and then you just slugged it out. I do want to talk a bit about one of my favorite parts of the game, which is the pre-game element. And this is a place where I think Fantasy Warriors had Warhammer Fantasy beat by a mile. And honestly, I don't think the, Fantasy Battle ever really matched Fantasy Warriors in this regard. And this is partly why you didn't need scenarios in this particular game. So as you can see here, there was a scouting phase. So basically it's the two armies are trying to scout out where they are in relation to each other, and you designate units in your army to scout, and more modifiers. But basically both sides build a little dice pool. You roll your pools, you tally up the total, and then the side that has the larger tally outscouts the enemy, or I love this, look at this, cutting off the section, but whatever. If you score double your opponent, you have outmaneuvered them, which is even better. And then that determines things like what time of day is it? And that is a huge part of the game, because some of these armies much prefer daytime, like the armies of man, I think is what they're called in this game, or the barbarian army, or the Amazon army, right? Other armies much prefer nighttime, like orcs, or goblins, or undead. And other armies don't really have a preference, like dwarves or elves. But if your army does have what they call bad light, and you're fighting in bad light, it has a huge effect on your army. It penalizes your shooting, it penalizes your melee, it makes it more likely that your army will fail their morale test, which they call command tests. So if you've got an army that has bad light, you really want to win that scouting round so that you can have some influence over what time of day you fight. And vice versa. I mean, if you have like a dwarf army, you don't care what time it is, so, you know, all the better to like force your, say, orc opponents to fight during the day. Then, this is the other cool bit, is you spontaneously set up the battlefield. You know, a lot of miniatures games kind of assume you set up the battlefield first, and then you might roll to see who gets their choice of table edge. This one, actually, it's a collaborative effort between you and your opponent, where you basically take turns putting terrain features on the table. And again, whether you out-scouted or out-maneuvered your opponent really, you know, has an effect on how much say-so you have over the terrain. There's other cool things like boasts and omens. You know, you can try and read the omens, you can make a boast, and then there's orders. So I've mentioned already that, you know, this game has a lot of counters in it. So let's get into the actual components of the game here. So this is the light tracker. This person, they didn't even fully pop it out of its cardboard. But anyway, you track, you know, each game turn is a turn on the time tracker. So like if you're, say, you know, an orc army, and it just turned out that you're starting on nighttime turn 5, you know you've only got a couple turns here before the sun comes up, and things are going to start turning against you. So it's really clever. I can't say enough good things about it. But let's see. Let's find an order counter in here. This is like units can threaten each other. So you just put this down to indicate, you know, this unit here is threatening this unit over here. You know, it's just to help you remember. And that's a fun mechanic as well, because like you can shake your opponent's unit, you know, before you charge into combat. They can also counter threaten you, and you can end up shaken or even driven into bloodlust, which is actually, back when I played the game, I played the orc army a lot, and that's actually one of my favorite tactics, is to threaten the enemy unit and try to get them to counter threaten me and drive me into bloodlust, because orcs are actually really good when they're in bloodlust. Some armies you want to avoid bloodlust as a morale status, but orcs they revel in it. So anyway, this is an example of an order counter. The armies are organized in a way where they're broken up into what are called commands, and each has a leader, a battle leader as they call it, and so each command has its own orders. So this blue flag means hold, and this red flag means attack. So you might put your, like if you had a command that was like primarily like stalwart spearmen, for example, you might put them on hold as your reserve. And then you had like, say, a command that was mostly like mounted troops, you would put them on attack. At least to start the game, right? But then, as the game goes on, maybe your mounted command gets kind of, you know, chewed up or whatever, and driven off. You might want to switch them to what are called oppose orders, which is basically like they're not necessarily going to go charging in at the slightest provocation. They'll fight, you know, but they'll also be able to fall back. Meanwhile, you might want to change your spearmen from hold over to attack. And that's really a big part of the game, is knowing what orders to issue at the top of the game, and then when to issue changes to orders. And it's a super fun part of the game because there's a tactical element, of course, but also you have to actually do it in the game. Like you have to dispatch a courier, like from your war chief, as they call them, the general. The general has to change the orders. So you have to dispatch, the war chief either has to physically go over to the battle leader and tell them to change the order, or they have to dispatch a courier to take the new orders over. Once the courier arrives, you have to do a test to see if the battle leader understands the new orders. And that can, result anything from, yes, of course, I understand these, to like the battle leader completely flips out, kills the courier, and then just goes off in some random direction, basically. which obviously is something more likely to happen with an orc army. But anyway, so okay, another counter that's very key to the game. So here we have a dwarf crossbowman, crossbow dwarf, and so for every missile unit, you have a stack of what they call volley counters. Each one of these represents, as you might guess, a volley of missiles coming out of that unit. And you get a certain amount of these every battle and per unit. And once that unit runs out, they can't shoot anymore. So again, this game is all about timing. When do you open up with your missile troops? When do you switch from defense to attack? When do you press your luck? It's a very sophisticated game. I would say it's probably more sophisticated than Warhammer Fantasy 4th Edition. And yet it was less complex than Warhammer Fantasy 3rd Edition, I would say. Certainly you didn't require a GM to run it like they recommended for Warhammer 3rd Edition. And yeah, I mean, these plastic injection molds for the time are actually quite nice, Yeah, they've got a little flashing, and they've got this, injection mark on the back, I guess. But the detail's decent. They paint up nicely. I can say that much. And I'm actually really looking forward to, painting these guys all over again. This will be my second full go around of painting these guys, but I don't mind at all because they're good quality miniatures. So I think I've rambled on enough at this point, but I'm so excited to have this box. It literally has everything. It even has the cardboard ruler, which, back in the day, along with the quick reference sheet, this was one of the very first things I lost. So this isn't even really a memory of mine of this being part of the game, but there it is, and it's on the back cover art as well. Oh, I just want to point out that the sides of the interior box actually have painting guides, which was very helpful to me as a beginning painter back in the day. So anyway, I think this is a real forgotten gem of the miniatures tabletop hobby. It's something that basically set the template for a particular type of product that is still coming out to this day. You can find downloads for the rules online. We'll put links in the show notes. Oh, and the very last thing is that I also picked up this, which was the only supplement that ever came out for Fantasy Warriors. I did not own this back in the day, but this is where you found the, well, first of all, this amazing counter sheet. This is so early 90s, it's painful. So this was for some of the new rules that were in the book. This came out a couple of year or two after the main game came out. And yeah, so this has the undead army, rules for mercenaries. Then they had, this was maybe a sign that the game was struggling a little bit. They reprinted all the army lists, including some new armies like Amazons, undead, mercenary half-orcs, mercenary giants, etc. But they reprinted all the army lists with revised points values. So obviously the game was a bit of a work in progress, but that's okay. Rules for multiplayer games as well. So this is, found this for very cheap on eBay actually, so I had to get it. Also art, notably for you Warhammer Fantasy Battle nerds, some very early art from none other than Mark Gibbons, who went on to work for Games Workshop and did a lot of very iconic 90s era Warhammer art. But yeah, so I've inventoried, what my current collection is, and I've made some wish lists and working out points values the old-fashioned way. Thank you very much. By hand. That's how you got to do it with these old games. Anyway, so if y'all are interested, I can post more updates on Fantasy Warriors as the project progresses. Whatever you want to see, let us know in the comments. And I hope you enjoyed this look at a forgotten gem. of the miniatures war game hobby.